Welcome back to Everything All the Time. I'm Pat O'Brien along with Court McCowan. Steve Fazio is our guest. He runs Fazio Enterprises, which is Fazio Cleaners here in L.A. I learned more about the cleaning business. The funny thing is, Court, it hasn't changed that much, has it, Steve?
Nope, same old sort of thing. Other than not using a stream and a rock, we basically have not evolved all that much.
In decades.
Wow. Well, I guess if it works, if it
works,
not broken, don't fix it.
Tell me, Steve Fazio, he's also got 30-plus years in law enforcement as reserve. And, Steve, you told me a story the other day about, I was talking about my kid when the cops came to his school. Yeah. And you told me a great story about what you do when you go to schools. Can you tell that one?
Yeah, one of the things I used to like to do is I'd like to go and sit in a auditorium sort of setting or a classroom, and have the students there, and I'd walk in with like a suit and tie and say, okay, now I want you to guess what it is that I am, and this is like 4th, 5th, 6th graders, and they'd say, you're a lawyer, you're a CPA, you're this, you're that, and I'd let them guess a little bit. I said, okay, so give me a minute, and I'd go to the back of the room, and I'd put on like, a polo shirt and some tennis shorts. I'd come out, what do you think I am now? And then they'd say, oh man, you're an athlete, you're this, you're that. They say, okay, thanks so much. I'm going to go back for a minute and just change. And then I come out in a full LAPD uniform, long sleeve, hash marks, all the battle ribbons and all that. And I would see their eyes just get really, really wide. It was like, wow, that's a whole different person than the one that I just got to know, as a dad and a brother and a son and a whatever. And I said, what am I now? And they'd say, wow, now you're a police officer. I said, okay, so have I changed, since you first saw me, in a suit and tie and in tennis shorts? What's the difference of what it is you're thinking about me now than before, And they would say, well, now you do this or do that. I said, yeah, but am I still a dad? Am I still a brother? Am I still a son? Am I still a father? And I thought, at least in my mind, I was helping them understand that, it's not just a one-dimensional thing. There's a person behind a uniform. It's not just a uniform walking at you or pulling you over. It's a person in there, and if you treat them with respect, generally speaking, they'll, show you that and afford you back that respect. And, I'm just kind of trying to open their mind a little bit as to the fact that it's not just a uniform. And I think it worked,
Yeah, loved it.
And
Good idea.
I thought it was a fun thing to do. I thought the kids got a lot out of it. And I think that kind of just sensitivity training, if you will, is very, very helpful. Earlier age is always better than, otherwise. And I think we need that on both sides of the aisle. I think, cops need to, just dress in plain clothes and go to African American churches and, be introduced as people to the community, and a lot of cops do that, and unfortunately a lot of cops have moved out of the city, and reside outside of the city, and, they don't feel that connection. And I think it's important to go to all the different community activities, and get involved.
That's a pay raise.
Steve, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, and I wanted to get your opinion on this. I think one of the biggest divides, and I think one of the biggest problems that you're seeing, and I think the reason it's the Black Lives Matter and these people are coming forward. Do you think on some level that when there is an incident, when an officer does something wrong, that and you can even see it when you go as far back as the Rodney King and everything like that, that there's no real, that people don't feel like there's real justice in a sense for themselves. A police officer's not really suffering the same consequences that a civilian suffers because, as you were just talking about, they are real people. They do make mistakes. And at the same time, though, they're not really they don't really suffer the same consequences. And a lot of times, and because it's so publicized, I think that's where a lot of the outrage is coming, is you're seeing these police officers, when they do make a mistake, when something does go wrong, and I'm not, I'm not laying all the blame on it, but when something goes wrong, they're not really seeing the same consequences come to them that come to an average citizen. Do you see that as being somewhat of where there's a big uprising about that?
I see, there's a closing of ranks in all industries when one of their own, falls off the ledge and needs some additional support, because I think everybody feels as though they could be that person tomorrow. Right. In some instances, not all, and not where there's outward abuse, but, in most of these things, most of them, I'm not saying all, in most of them, there's not really outward abuse. There's a mistake, or there's a misinterpretation of what was going on, or there was an adrenaline high that caused an action that was, upon reflection and review and scrutiny, an inappropriate action. But there wasn't an underlying, desire upon the person that, promulgated that issue to have gone out that day to do that. They got scared, or they saw something.
Absolutely, absolutely.
They're humans. You know, I think the guy in St. Paul was. Don't respond to this because I don't. It was absolutely crazy. There was something wrong with that guy, the cop, the policeman. But for the most part, it always seems to be black versus. I don't know. I think the public relations battle is going on the police side, and Black Lives Matter is a whole nother 2-hour show. And I think that movement's going to die out. I'll be anxious to hear what Obama says today because that's a big key. But before we go, back to this training, because am I wrong? Do police here you're supposed to get like 100 hours, they don't get 10, right? I mean, just not enough training. Sit in the class and talk about what to do if a guy, does this or that.
Well, I can only speak for like LAPD, where everything is debriefed and rebriefed and churned up, and there might be a appearance of closing ranks to the public, but internally, there's a full-scale investigation with very, very. There's cops like you see on the TV shows inside of these police departments that want to burn other cops. They just don't want to have anybody out there that represents their brand in the marketplace that's going to diminish it, and they're doing everything they can to make sure to weed them out. They're not particularly well liked by other cops, but they're out there. So there's a check and balance internally in these organizations. It may not appear that way, to the outside,
right,
where somebody saying, we're under investigation, and they're
there's certain standards too. I mean, the unions have been so great; they put certain standards there, so it's hard to prosecute a police officer. Otherwise, you'd spend the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, you just brought up a great point. You said, you're out on the job and you get this adrenaline high and something. Can you speak to? I mean, you've been in a situation where, you're on a call, you're on something happens, and there's a bit, and I don't want to say fear. Maybe that's not the word. Maybe there's, like you said, an adrenaline rush where something goes on. Can you talk a little bit about that, like what that's like to be out there and have that adrenaline rush? And I mean, you have to make these crazy split decisions. I mean, just snap decisions so quickly.
And I watched it, and I looked at the capacities for people that have been out there a long time versus someone new, and I call it a recycle time. So the new cop out there, has an adrenaline high, and then within, a half an hour, basically they're restabilized. The guy that's been out there maybe for 20 years on the streets that just had to drive 60 miles an hour code 3 through traffic, getting to a robbery in progress, only then to plan the situation, not knowing what was maybe inside, and a lot of adrenaline's being pushed, a lot of fight or flight instincts are happening. You got different coordinated activities with setting up perimeters, guiding air units, making sure people that are outside, are out of the way. You're yelling, you're screaming, you're doing everything you know how to do to keep everyone safe. Well, after that, and you've been out there for 10 or 15 years, you might need 3 hours, to decompress all that and get restabilized in terms of your, adrenaline gland and everything else, just to kind of take a deep breath. So, it does take a toll. There are people out there doing those jobs every day, obviously, as we all know, across the nation. They're handling these calls all the time. Most of them are false alarms. But that false alarm call doesn't mean at the end of it that, you're going to be just honky-dory and ready to go jaunty jolly to the next thing. Because you just dealt with something, where your adrenaline's pumping, your heart is pumping, So we ask a lot of these folks, in the public safety sector, and, we are very well aware of a lot of the mistakes made nowadays, and that's fine. It is what it is, and we're putting body cameras on cops and everything else. But, I look at it, just kind of leaving you with an idea here. I look at it as like a basketball game, a Laker game. The guy on the floor that's the center has a job, and he's doing it, and he's not necessarily completely aware of what the guard's doing, and the coach has got a different view, and the guy that's waiting to get in the game has got a little different view, and the spectator up in the nosebleed system, seats has got another view, and the vendor's got another view. So there's a lot of different viewpoints as to what's going on in the field, and every view is probably accurate based upon their perspective. But there's no real necessarily common view. Investigators of incidences in the police department take into consideration what that person did that morning when they woke up. That they had an argument with their spouse, or are they having a good day or a bad day? They really try to get in the head of what it is that was going on in order to really assess whether or not what was done in the field in real time, was appropriate or not. And, I think they do, by and large, an excellent job of making sure to weed out the folks that aren't really, the best for that particular profession, or taking them out of the street and putting them somewhere else. But, things do happen. Unfortunately, we're still recruiting from the human race.
But we got to go here pretty quick. And by and large is the key words there. And by the way, back to your basketball metaphor, the great players talk about the Magics and the Jordans and the Birds. They see everything. They see the whole court and the whole floor, and that's what the police have to see. Understand the African American. Understand. I guess you want to include the Irish. I don't know what we've done.
Absolutely.
Don't forget the
we built
Italians.
this country.
Don't forget the Italians.
Right, so we can't go in the buildings that we built back in the
Yeah.
40s. Steve, you're great to come on. You're great for LA, and Fazio Cleaners is great. And
Yes.
50% off.
Yeah.
I love that.
I'll be bringing you lots of
Now,
stuff there.
Steve, I love you. Thank you very much for coming on. Okay.
Honor was mine. Thanks so much.
Okay,
Thanks,
there
Steve.
goes Steve Fazio. With honestly, not a big slam against the police because he can't do that. But he made some good points. I mean, he did use the words by and large. They're pretty good. And I don't want to be the police hater here, but some of them are really bad.
I think and
Some of them.
I know, and I wanted to. The point I really wanted to get to is I think the biggest frustration comes from people not feeling like justice is being. I mean, when you talk about, he talked about situations, and you look at these situations when they really are wrong, when they're really screwing up.
Hard to convict a cop.
And it's like, but nobody's getting justice for that. I mean, how do you? I mean. It's that's the frustrating thing.
That's the problem. You see,
if a guy does
St.
something,
Paul will probably get off on something.
I had a friend.
Then watch what happens.
I had a very, very good friend of mine, a very close
You have a
friend of
friend?
mine, shot at a Halloween party, shot in the back and killed by a police officer. He was
I remember that
He
incident,
was in
yeah.
a private home, and it was a Halloween party. They came for a noise call, and
Up in the hills, right?
yeah, up in the Hollywood Hills, and they came for a noise call, and it's Halloween, and he has on a costume with a plastic gun, and he's in a bedroom talking to another friend. The police come around the corner without provocation and without anything, shoot him in the back and kill him. Now, they had no business being there. They were trespassing. They were on a noise call, and here's a situation where a guy lost his life because they suffered nothing.
Right.
Nothing
I
happened.
remember that. It was awful.
And it was one of my really close friends, and so I understand the frustration that people feel, and I just feel like if there was more justice dealt out,
What happened to that cop?
nothing,
Yeah.
absolutely nothing.
When we come back, we're going to give out Court's license plate number and
Yeah.
car and color, and you police out there can follow him around. You all know me. So,
Yeah, he
by the
has-
way, if you walk around town and you see policemen today, you give a thumbs up, and most of them will give you a nice smile.
And like I said, it's
but make
you
sure,
can't-
make sure it's a thumbs
yeah,
up.
just a thumb. Well, some might think it's a little one, but I don't know. But no, you got to support it. You got to support
What's wrong with
for the most part because, like you said, 98% are great, and we need them. We need them.
We need them.
We
Be back
do.
in a minute.